I'd like to start you off with a quote by Vin Diesel. He said, "It wasn't until I was in college and I got my first motorcycle that I truly understood the thrill of speed." The reason I chose to start off my speech with this quote is because it really relates to me, because I didn't get my first motorcycle until my freshman year of college. When you're going down the road at 60 miles an hour with nothing around you besides the wind, the asphalt, and you're only wearing your helmet, it's way different than driving 60 miles an hour in a vehicle when you have 2,000 pounds of metal around you. It's a thrill like no other. First off, I believe my topic relates to me because it's credible because I myself ride a motorcycle. More importantly, I ride a Harley Davidson. Today I'm going to take you through a brief history of Harley Davidson motorcycles. My first topic I'd like to present to you is about the engines that Harley Davidson has used throughout their history. According to J&P Cycles in Harley Davidson history, Harley Davidson is known for their big 45-degree V-twin air-cooled engines. Harley Davidson has stayed true to their roots by only having changed their engine design 3 times in the entire history of Harley Davidson. The newest iteration being the Milwaukee 8, which is on all of the new bikes, including my own. I have a Milwaukee 8, and it's the same big V-twin air-cooled V engine. The next topic I would like to talk about is where Harley Davidson got their roots. As big as Harley Davidson is today, it's hard to believe where they started off as. According to a history of Harley Davidson, the Harley Davidson Company, Harley Davidson was founded in a small shed outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, by William S. Harley and William A. Davidson in 1903. Harley still has a huge factory in Milwaukee, which is now a museum. In the museum, they hold some of the most famous designs that Harley has ever created, and they also have some of the most famous bikes of people who have owned Harley Davidsons. For an example, one of Elvis Presley's, I think, 1958 Harley Davidsons is inside the museum. The next topic, The last topic I'd like to talk about is who the face of Harley Davidson has been for the last couple decades. Willie G. Davidson. According to the Harley Museum, this day, Willie G. Davidson joined the company on February 18th, 1963, and has a background in industrial design. Willie G. is the grandson of co-founder William A. Davidson and has produced some of the most famous designs that Harley Davidson has ever come out with. A couple examples are the 1971 FX Superglide and the 1977 FXS Lowrider. Another interesting thing about Willie G is that he didn't just start taking over the company. He started from the bottom, being an industrial, not just because his dad was, or his grandfather was one of the co-founders. He didn't start way at the top. He started somewhere in the middle. He was an industrial designer, and then eventually he worked his way up to becoming the CEO of the company, and he just recently retired, I think in 2016, so he was in control of Harley Davidson for quite some time. In summation, I've told you about the engines Harley uses on all their bikes, where and when Harley Davidson got their start, and who the most famous face in the company is and has been for a while. I would like to leave you all off with a quote that I think really embodies the spirit of Harley Davidson. It goes, "Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes in the middle of nowhere you find yourself anonymous." Thank you for taking the time to listen to my speech, and I hope that y'all have come to appreciate the topic as much as I have. Thank you. like to start you off with a quote by Vin Diesel, and he says, "It wasn't until I got to college that I got my first motorcycle that I understood the thrill of speed." The reason I chose to start off with my speech with this quote is because I thought it related to me, because I didn't get my first motorcycle until I was in college, and the speed on a motorcycle is way different than the speed on going on a car. For example, you're going down the road with 60 miles an hour with nothing but the shirt on your back, your pants, and your helmet. You got nothing else between you and the road. Whereas if you're in a vehicle, you have 2,000 pounds of metal surrounding you. You're more likely to be okay. I believe that my topic is credible because I own a motorcycle, more importantly, a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Today I'm going to take you through a brief history of Harley-Davidson motorcycles. The first topic I would like to talk about is the engines that Harley-Davidson uses on all their bikes. According to J&P Cycles, in Harley-Davidson motorcycle history, Harley-Davidson is known for their big V-twin 45-degree air-cooled engines that they use on every single one of their bikes. Harley-Davidson has stayed true to its roots for the past 80 years, as they have only changed the design on their motorcycle engines 3 times, with the newest iteration being the Milwaukee 8, which is what's currently on all Harley-Davidson motorcycles, including my own. The Milwaukee 8 was introduced in 2016, and it probably will be the Harley-Davidson engine for many years to come. The next topic I would like to talk about is where Harley-Davidson got their roots. As big as a company that Harley-Davidson is today, you probably wouldn't expect where they started at. According to a history of the Harley-Davidson company, Harley-Davidson was founded in a small shed outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1903 by William S. Harley and William A. Davidson. Little fun fact, the first Harley-Davidson store actually opened in 1904 in Chicago, I believe. Harley still has a huge factory in Milwaukee. It's now a museum mainly where they keep some of the most famous Harley-Davidson motorcycle designs, some of their racing bikes. If y'all didn't know, Harley-Davidson has a big racing history as well. And they also keep some of the bikes of the most famous celebrities ever owned a Harley-Davidson. For example, I think Elvis's 1958 Harley-Davidson is in the museum, and you can go see it if you're ever in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The next topic I would like to talk about is where Harley-Davidson, or who the most recognizable face in Harley-Davidson is, and that is Willie G. Davidson. According to the Harley Museum on this day, Willie G. Davidson joined Harley on February 18th, 1963 with a background in industrial design. Willie G. is the grandson of William A. Davidson, who was one of the co-founders of Harley-Davidson. Willie G., being the grandson of one of the co-founders, actually didn't start way at the top. He actually started somewhere in the middle. He worked his way from being a designer on some of the bikes. He went from being an industrial designer on the bikes all the way up to being the CEO of the company at one point. He also has created some of the most influential designs ever in Harley-Davidson. Some examples are the 1971 FX Superglide and the 1977 FXS Lowrider. After listening to my 3 points, I hope you have a brief understanding of the vast history of Harley-Davidson motorcycles. In summation, I have told y'all about the engines Harley uses on all their bikes, where and when Harley-Davidson got their start, and who the most recognizable face of Harley-Davidson has been and will be for many more years to come. I would like to leave y'all off with a quote that I really think embodies the spirit of Harley-Davidson, and it goes, "Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes in the middle of nowhere you find yourself," and it's anonymous. Nobody knows who wrote it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my speech, and I hope y'all have come to find my topic as interesting as I think it is. Thank you.